Well, hello, Internet podcast family, and welcome back to another episode of what we lovingly call the Ricecast with Dr. Pastor Willie Rice. Pastor, how you feeling today?
Great. Good to be with you.
We're here. We're doing it.
We're here and we're doing it. That's right. It's been I just want to say it's been a really crazy couple of weeks in terms of our schedule, but it's really good to be back and to be home for a little season here, and it's also great just to Calvary to get into our fall schedule.
That's
last
right.
weekend, and to just kind of feel like, hey, we're moving forward. Still got a lot of adversity with things happening in the culture and COVID and all of that, but we're making progress. We're going forward, and we had a great weekend, and looking forward to an exciting fall ahead.
Yeah, talking about some housekeeping things up front. We did start our we started a whole bunch of groups. Hey, if you are not involved in a group, it is certainly not too late to jump in. Our Sunday morning groups, there's a bunch meeting on all of our campuses now. They met for the first time this last Sunday. We had our group connect 2 weeks before, but they actually were in the group this week. We got an online group. If you're tuning in online, we're starting that up this week. And then we had Sunday night was our night of worship. That was pretty great.
Great time, great crowd. All of that was good, and all of those are important things. Just to highlight, hey, it's time to be connected, get connected, and we just felt like, gosh, we needed kind of, in a way, we're going back to the future here, but we just need to get back to making an opportunity for everybody of every age to simply connect on Sunday morning at the same time. And just to make it really, really easy. And there was a lot of excitement, a lot of new people in our Bible study connection groups. And again, you're welcome to jump in anytime.
Yeah.
On Sunday morning, there's a group for you, and we would love to have you get connected in a Bible study group on Sunday morning. And we'll be talking on Wednesday nights about some discipleship training opportunities. We have groups that meet during the week, but we also have some specific classes that are focused on kind of teaching things that you might not get in just a normal Bible study group, and they're able to focus on either life skill application like parenting, marriage, or something, or doctrinal issues dealing with our Christian faith. So we're excited about those opportunities also. They're just great opportunities to connect with people. We always say the key to spiritual growth is connecting to God's people and God's Word. Now, you can describe it a whole bunch of ways. It can be fancier, but at the end of the day, get connected to God's people, get connected to God's Word. That's what produces spiritual growth.
Yeah, and it's a great time to do that. Like as of this recording, like Pastor said, it's tonight. I think we'll get this out sometime Wednesday afternoon, but Wednesday night is kind of we're introducing all the different classes, but again, it's just a good time to jump in wherever is best to connect Wednesday, Sunday morning. It's all just starting up, so now is a great time if you're listening to this. And you want to get plugged in, this is a great opportunity. We keep using the word fall, Pastor. It doesn't really feel like fall.
Nor are we actually in fall.
Yeah, I guess that's true, too.
There is no sense in which this is the fall, right? There's not even like pumpkin spice out yet, right?
Right.
You see,
that's a huge deal.
That's like the beginning.
Yeah.
When Starbucks is doing their pumpkin spice lattes or whatever. And that you see the pumpkin creamer in the that's for me, is it? And we're not even there yet.
No,
so we're always been a little bit ahead here at Calvary. We're ahead of the curve.
We're ahead of the calendar, ahead of the curve. Yeah, August, September, they're tough. What are you doing? You're kind of in summer. You're kind of not quite fall yet.
And in Florida, it's maybe one of the hardest weather-wise. To me, this is always the hardest time of year in Florida because at least after Labor Day, other people start cooling off. They start. You see them on Instagram wearing their little scarves and sweaters, and we're still it's 96 degrees. It doesn't change. September doesn't change much, and so but hey, we'll be laughing come February. I promise you that.
And it's good to say because we got our Canadian listeners. I know you're out there. I hear from you. And we took our victory lap in February. We did. We did it loud and proud. But you'll be happy to know. Right now,
we envy you.
You need a new T-shirt 3 seconds after being outside.
That's right.
It is unbearably hot right now. It's part of the territory. But I tell you what is fun that happens in August and September, Pastor, is football.
Well, most people know I love football. It's my favorite sport just to watch, and played a little bit as a little boy, not anything big, just little boy football. But I always loved football, and so guys are practicing, and some NFL's doing exhibition games.
Yeah.
And, so it's here we are, just a couple weeks away. It's an exciting time of year.
we got the Bucks firing back up. Everyone's excited about that. I thought I saw Tom Brady on campus recently.
Did you?
I guess there was Publix was shooting some sort of commercial with someone in a Bucks uniform that looked an awful lot to me like Tom Brady.
I don't know.
I don't know. I didn't get that confirmed. I'll reach out to Mr. Kilgore after this. But yeah, it's an exciting time. All kinds of fun stuff going on around here. All things firing back up. We got a beach baptism coming up in a couple weeks. It's a good time. You're getting back in rhythms. Kids are back in school. Fun time at Calvary for sure. We want to talk about something today, though. Want to get into a pretty somber topic. But I think it's been on everybody's radar. A lot of people have been seeing some of these stories and some of these images, some of these pictures and things that are coming out of Afghanistan. So before we get into all that, I'll just say that's the topic we're going to cover today. I realize there's sensitivities, there's anxieties that are flared up by different things. So that's what we're going to talk about today because it's something it's a story we're all following along with. Particularly here as Christians and here at the church, you really feel for your brothers and sisters over there because it's a particularly perilous time for them. But before I even say more than that, Pastor, just what was as that story started to unravel and you started to see how it was playing out, what were some of your first thoughts?
Wow, there's so many, and I know everybody is reacting to it. And look, it's easy also to be the Monday morning quarterback, to use a football metaphor, and I don't want to just unnecessarily pile on, but there are some extremely disturbing things that are happening, and I think my first reaction was just sadness and also a bit of embarrassment. Because it's hard, and listen, we all love our country here, but it's hard not to believe that this hasn't been botched in some pretty significant ways. I think it's almost universally believed. Now, some would say, well, it was botched at the beginning. We should have never been there. Sure. But I think people are forgetting what brought us there. And, it seems like a long time ago now. But, it's coming up on 20 years since 9/11. And a lot of young people weren't even born then. That's hard to imagine, but it's true. But there was a reason the United States felt like we had to go on the offense against radical Islamic regimes, and they had brought terror to our shore. They had brought an attack to our shores, and they were being fostered and sheltered in these radical Islamic territories, and Afghanistan was one of the worst. And so we went in there ostensibly to get Osama bin Laden and the people who had attacked America. Of course, it became a very, very long process. But really, we've now had two presidents. President Trump made it a big deal. He really reversed course from previous conservative administrations and said we need to get out of these foreign wars. And that resonated with a lot of people on the right and even people on the left who didn't like him may have agreed with him on that one.
Yep.
The problem is that we now have what we're having. And then, of course, this administration must bear some of the blame in the execution. And we don't get on here and try to just take pot shots at political leaders. But I don't know how you look at this because, and this is part of the anger of that I have felt, is President Biden just weeks ago was asked about this and said authoritatively, this is not going to happen. The Afghan government is stable. Many of you have watched the clips. This is not going to be like Vietnam. Well, it's exactly like the Vietnam pullout. It could not have been more wrong. Now, presidents could be wrong, and maybe they get bad advice, but we look for our leaders to make good decisions with good information.
Yeah.
And obviously, there were some bad decisions, and clearly there's some bad information. And I don't know how you look at that without being embarrassed, without grieving. And there's so many people grieving. The people who fought in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
The people who's lost loved ones. Can you imagine the veterans right now, what they're feeling? Who are called to what they believe was a noble cause.
Yeah.
And again, wars can be controversial, but most people were not. The Afghan conflict was not that controversial. Now, the Iraq war was a little more controversial. But the Afghan conflict, a lot of people understood. It's like, these people attacked us. They're being harbored. this is a horror just on a humanitarian level. Even if they
Right.
hadn't bothered us,
Right.
we would be saying this is a horrific regime. What
Yeah.
the Taliban did. This is monstrous. What they were doing to women and children and innocent people. This is horrific. And so our people were felt like, hey, this is a noble cause. Not only are we protecting our families from people who have attacked us,
Yeah.
but we are going on the offense to also help other people. And now we're coming up on a 20th year anniversary, and we have watched it basically get turned back over to the very people who had it to begin with.
Right.
So our veterans, for those of you who may have fought, I can't imagine what you feel.
Yeah.
My heart hurts for you. I'm embarrassed for our country. Frankly, it's our podcast. We can say anything more,
That's right.
can we? I'm a little embarrassed by how our leaders handled this. I think they really, really botched this, and they have to own it.
Yeah.
And they have to own it. And so I'm sad about that.
Yeah.
A little angry about it, frankly. And I could not hurt more for the people who are there and thinking about what they're going to face.
Right, and that's a great next point, because why that anger comes up. Certainly, leaders make decisions we don't agree with and play out to not be good. That happens. But when you look at the humanitarian immediate impact too, like we're not talking. This was over several months. Seemed like hours. Like we removed troops, and this whole thing came crashing down. And I think that's what so many of us are dealing with in the fall. Because again, it's foreign policy. There's things here we're not going to understand. But when you see a airplane packed full of families and children with nothing, they have nothing to their name. They're just fleeing desperately. When you see, I won't go into some of the more graphic images that have come out, but it's just horrific. So how do you start to process any of that? How do you start to wrap your head around just that amount of human suffering?
Well, I think it's important. Obviously, to ask the question you're asking. It's important to ask the question you're asking. There are public policy considerations and political things, and you're right. I mean, it's important to debate those. It's important to realize elections have consequences. It's important to understand why you're voting for people and who you're voting for, and that's going to be there. But we're not the public policy experts. We,
Right.
as bright as you and I are, we're not foreign policy experts.
That's
we
right.
have opinions.
Yeah.
I have opinions. I think they're good as most, but we're not public policy experts and don't pretend to be.
Yeah.
But we can obviously, you don't have to be an expert to go, this was a tragedy.
Yeah.
So, okay, there's going to be public policy considerations, political debates. Let's set that aside. We get it. How do we as Christians, this is kind of where we are.
Yeah.
How do we as followers of Christ, how are we processing it? And it takes me back to a series that I did over about a year ago this time from Lamentations.
Yeah.
We did it back in August of 2020. So, if you're online and weren't here then, you could go back. It was a book I'd never preached from much, and we went through the book of Lamentations over a 5-week period, and it became, to me, one of the most profitable series for me just personally to wrestle with those issues. And one of the things we said there was a lament that, why is the book of Lamentations even there? The word lament means to wail. It means to mourn. It means to cry. That's a book in the Bible. Like, aren't we
Right.
supposed to be happy and clap our hands and talk about all the victories we have? And we do. Most of our worship songs today are triumphal.
Yeah.
But there is, right there in the book of the Bible, a book of Lamentations. Mm-hmm. And we asked the question why, and we read it, and we studied it. And I think one of the things we concluded was, is that we need space to lament. Mm. There are things in our world that are broken, that are so bigger than we are, so broken, so devastating, so sad. Mm. Sometimes it's in the world at large. Sometimes it's in our own personal space.
Right.
The idea, again, that, hey, I trust Christ and everything goes well for me, that has more in common with paganism.
Yeah.
That's paganism. Paganism is, I do this for my God, he does this for me. Mm-hmm. I bring this sacrifice, the crops grow.
It's transactional.
It's transactional. It's quid pro quo. And while there is a blessing that comes from obeying God, no question, and the Bible talks about that blessing that comes from obedience to God, the Bible does not promise us a world without pain or suffering. In fact, it tells us quite the opposite. And so I think sometimes when you get in a very superficial situation and maybe people are brand new to the faith or there's kind of a lot of superficial teaching, there's this idea, God's my lucky charm, you know? Yeah. No, he's not. And I hear this even today. To go to another issue, I hear people, I've heard it, people have posted these things. If you have Jesus, you don't need a vaccine. If you have the Holy Spirit, you're not going to get COVID. Well, that's just not true. There's no promise in the Bible that says that.
Yeah.
Okay? I have Jesus. I still buckle my seatbelt if I'm going to drive. You know why? Because some nut might plow into me, or I might be the nut and plow into somebody else, right? You know, I'm going to take precautions. It's not getting the vaccine controversy, but the point is, you know, having Jesus, having faith, believing in God is not a get out of trouble free card.
Right.
This world is full of trouble.
Right.
So back to Lamentations. We need to learn how to lament sometimes.
Yeah.
There is a time to cry. There's a time to weep. We said a lament is a prayer born out of pain, rooted in hope. And the reality is sometimes you just see things and the only appropriate response is to lament. It is to weep. It is when we talk to God to express how awful the situation is. That's what a lament was. God, this is awful. And we learned a lament is a place where you can ask questions of God. Why aren't you doing something? How could you let this happen?
Yeah.
The Lamentations ask those questions. But what you also find in the Lamentations is that they're rooted in hope, that you never lose sense of, while I don't understand it, I do know God is there. And while my heart is broken, I will find my hope in the Lord. His mercies are new every morning. So that was the beauty of Lamentations. And I guess as you ask that question, my mind goes back there.
Yeah.
And I think about we need space. So to mourn, to grieve, to say this is awful, this is horrible.
Yeah.
I don't understand why God would let this happen. I don't understand why this is occurring. Those are all good questions to ask.
Yeah.
I think you should ask them. I think you should pray. And then I think you should still trust God, because if you don't, you're in a pretty hopeless place.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all very well said, and I think it's, and even it crossed my mind just as you were saying, maybe you've seen some of the story, but you haven't really had the time or the space or just haven't taken a minute to put yourself there. Because I almost think it is, especially in this regard, like Pastor said, we partner with, through the X150 vision and all these things we do, we partner with Christians all over the world. And if you haven't even just taken a second and thought about what it's like to be a Christian in Afghanistan right now, you should pause and take a moment. And if you haven't, if you felt no reason to lament prior to that, you should take a moment and really pause and think about what it means to be a Christian in some of these places. Because overnight, I mean, I read somewhere that there was a church movement exploding, a gospel movement. There was a lot of Christianity spreading in that part of the world because they had experienced some freedoms they hadn't experienced before to be able to talk about things. And do things a little bit more publicly, and just overnight, how that can turn. It's almost, and I'm curious your thoughts here. It's almost healthy to pause and mourn for the people, to let them know that we're in this with them.
If you were an 8-year-old girl in Afghanistan, a month ago you had hope. You didn't have a good country to live in. You were poor. They don't have things we had. But if you had, let's say you're the parent of an 8-year-old girl, you'd had hope. You know, you thought, you know what, we're at least there's hope. You know, she's going to go to school. There's a measure of freedom. We're not afraid most of the time for our life. I mean, there are places where you had the Taliban, but in some of the cities, like, okay, there's a degree of security.
Yeah.
Today, you wouldn't have any hope. You know, that parent today is going, Muslim, Christian, or otherwise, that parent today is going, what hope do I have for my daughter?
Yeah.
What hope do I have for my children? And if you're a Christian, all the more reason to know. The reports we're getting from over there are people just, they know They may die. House church leaders have been told, we know who you are. It's heartbreaking. And so the question for us is, okay, how do we process it? Well, we weep, you know. We weep. We express our pain to God. We ask our questions. It's okay to ask our questions. Don't let anybody tell you, you can't ask a question. Have they read the Bible? Go read the book of Lamentation.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty dark book. But there are some dark times where I think in your prayers, an honest person is going to be asking, God, where are you? How do I have hope? You're asking the questions. Because to ask them is to direct them. To ask them is to believe somebody is listening. To ask them is to believe there could be and will be one day an answer. So it doesn't mean I get an answer. It doesn't mean I have a nice little answer. But it means at the end I get to choose, this is completely hopeless, or God has a purpose. God is at work even when I don't see it. Maybe I'll never see it in my life, but I will put my trust in the Lord and I will put my hope in Him. So Lamentations, go back and read through it. And if you feel like lamenting a bit, lament.
Yeah,
There's a season for grieving. I think the worst thing you could do is just say, I'm going to turn off the TV and I'm going to turn off the news stories and pretend like I didn't see it.
Right.
Well, you can't pretend like you didn't see it. Not if you're a human being.
Right.
So it's very sad. And you mentioned the Christians. Yes, it's sad, but it's also sad for many, many of the Muslim people there and who don't.
Absolutely.
You know, there are many, many people in the Muslim world who are kind and good and decent people. There is an element of radical Islam.
Yeah.
And we could talk about Islam, and I think they've taken it to its almost logical extreme when they are that radicalized. I think there's a reason that the Islamic religion tends to radicalize people. But I do want to say at the same time, there are many, many people in the Muslim world who are just, you would be happy to live next to them. You would be happy to know them as your neighbors. They care about their families. They care about their communities. You go back and look at pictures of Afghanistan from the early 1970s. It looks like an American city. And they were living in a fairly modern world, and women had opportunities for education and teaching and driving cars. You know, it was...
Yeah,
that's all gone. And so I weep for them. I think it's also worth talking about the problem of refugees because, you know, we touch on political things, you know, just enough to hack everybody off. So let me talk to you because sometimes, you know, maybe a lot of our crowd, maybe they tend to be a little more conservative, and there's been maybe in the conservative, you know, this anti-immigrant stance. And I understand why. I understand the need to control borders and have law and order. I get that. I'm not for people just pouring over indiscriminately and lawlessness. But if you're not, I always get a little nervous, though, when you get on that, because throughout the Bible, there is a reminder to care for the poor and to care for the immigrant. And when I see those people on that airplane, my first question was, I mean, packed in there. I thought, if you haven't seen it, it's like hundreds of people, literally almost stacked on one another in one of these huge cargo planes. They're not sitting in seats waiting for their peanuts, you know, and Coke. Can I have Diet Coke or 7-Up? No, we're out of Coke. Oh, what a terrible flight. Get out of there. Now, these are people that are sitting on the floor, packed in because they managed to get in there before they closed the door.
Right.
And I thought, they have everything. They're taking what they have is what they have on their back.
That's it.
They don't have a suitcase. There's not a cargo plane. They're not going to land and then go to the luggage area and get their suitcase.
Yeah.
You know what they're bringing? What they have on.
Right.
They're bringing what they had on and what they had in their pocket. And then I thought, well, where are they going? I don't know. Where are we taking them? Where are you going to take these people? And I saw a politician. She happened to be a Republican politician. I guess she's running for an office somewhere. I don't know her. It's not in our area.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, she tweeted the other day, not one refugee to America. Not one. That was her tweet. I thought, that is absolutely horrible. If I were to tell you, I can't think of anything more unchristian and more uncompassionate. Now, look, I'm not saying America can solve every problem in the world, but we helped create this problem.
Right.
If I were to tell you, hey, that plane is actually coming to Tampa, Florida. I got news. You know, I'm on speed dial with the higher ups, and they called me and said we're taking them to Tampa, Florida. Would it be these people are going to land in Tampa, Florida? They have nowhere to go. They have nowhere to go. They have no clothes. And we're just looking, would anyone go down? Would you be willing to take some folks down to the Tampa airport and greet them on the tarmac? And could you help us maybe find some place for them to live or stay?
Yeah.
Would your church be willing to do that? Well, I hope. Now, that's, it's all far more complex than that, I get.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you just want to go? Isn't there something inside of you that would want to go? I'll go. Well, let's go down to the Tampa airport with a sign that says welcome.
Yeah.
Show me how to write welcome in Afghan, whatever the language is. Help me. And look, I know everybody can't take people into their house, and I get their problems with that. And you're like, I don't even know who these people are. But wouldn't you want to say, hey, we'll figure this out, but for right now, we know where you can get 3 meals tomorrow. We know where you can lay your head tonight.
Yeah.
And we got to figure this out, and we'll find a place for them to live. Like let's begin to find a place, and let's see if they we can get jobs. Wouldn't you want to be the people saying we could help? And I can hear somebody saying, "Now, Pastor, you're just an idealist. The United States can't take in millions and millions and millions of people."
Right.
Okay, you're right. I get that. We can take in some.
Yeah.
We can take in some. And by the way, we caused this problem. We help cause it, I should say.
Yeah.
We didn't cause it, but, this whole thing that happened last week, we kind of did. So don't you feel like there's some responsibility to go, hey, here's a place where you can bring your 8-year-old daughter and she'll be safe tonight. And then let's help you figure out. And because, look, people go, well, what if there's a terrorist in there? Can I tell you, most of those people packed in that cargo plane are not terrorists. They're the ones running from the terrorists.
Right.
The only reason I go to, I know they're not landing in Tampa and all that.
Right.
Just remember that when the conversation about immigration and refugees come up. Okay? I'm not talking about open borders, I don't want to get into all those debates. I just want you to know it's a more nuanced conversation than build the wall. It's a little more of a nuanced conversation to say, here are people who are poor and hurting and afraid. And by the way, I don't know if you've been around America lately. People are hiring everywhere.
Right.
We don't have enough workers. Right. Have you noticed that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They don't have enough workers right now. They can't even open half the fast food restaurants.
Yeah.
Because they don't have workers. I went to one the other day. I can't believe I'm going to get a sandwich at this place, and it's a restaurant you don't get too much. Closed.
Yeah.
Open 3 days a week.
Yep.
So you got jobs, you got people willing to pay. And can I just remind you, there's plenty of room in America. If you haven't driven through North Dakota lately, let me encourage you to drive. There's plenty of room.
Yeah.
Okay, you say, well, there's no room on my street.
Right.
Well, take a trip sometime.
Yeah.
There's, so I just use this as an example to say, our conversations need to be nuanced, and they need to be infused with compassion for people who are hurting, because most of the refugees around the world are simply trying to have a better life. That's all. That's all. They're just trying to have a better life.
Yeah.
And I know the southern border is a hot topic, and I don't believe there should be an open border. I think you should enforce the laws, honestly, because I think that's fair to immigrants. I think when you have an open border policy, since you have an open border policy, you're being unfair to the people who are waiting in line trying to do it the right way.
Sure.
It's like if you're waiting in a long line at Disney World, there's people are cutting in, and then that creates human trafficking. So I think there's a huge crisis at the border. I'm not a person. I'll go ahead and be political. I think the Biden administration has absolutely botched that as well. When you open it up, you open up for human trafficking and all that goes with it. So I do not believe that it is a humanitarian policy to say we're just opening our border.
Right.
Traffic people here. However, when you have those conversations, just remember, many of the people who are trying to come here,
right,
they're just trying to come for a better life.
Oh, yeah.
They're just trying to come for a better life. And honestly, they know their life is going to be poor and hard, but they'd rather be poor and have a hard life here, so that their child can have a better future.
Right.
And so when you have these conversations, I just wish our politicians, and I certainly wish, even if the politicians won't, I wish Christians would have a nuanced, compassion-based view of these very complex issues. So I'll get off my hobby horse now.
But that's exactly it, though. In both of these things, you have, of course, there's policy, of course, there's issues, of course, there's a way that this can be executed. But it's critical, I think, to go into these conversations at times with your heart broken. Think to yourself, what would it take for you to take your family and nothing else?
What would it take?
What would your situation have been like to just get on a plane like you, not meant for people. This plane was meant for bringing like tanks, from my understanding.
You would have to be so desperate.
How desperate would you be?
How desperate would you have to be to take your kids, run to an airport, climb on a plane, and say, just take me?
Right.
That's how desperate those
take
people
me
are.
Anywhere.
Take
By the
me
way, like
anywhere.
you said, they anywhere.
Where
but
are you going
here.
to eat tomorrow? I don't know.
But on that plane,
where are you going to sleep tomorrow? I don't know. What are you going to do a year from now? I don't know. Just take me out of here.
Right.
And it breaks your heart. It just breaks your heart.
Yeah.
So, again, are these complex issues? Yes.
100%.
And I get it. These are, and when people think it's simple, well, it's not simple. But, boy, we have to approach these decisions with a degree of compassion and morality and wisdom. And it's why, I'm just going to say, it's why when you do vote, I hope you'll pay attention. I hope you'll listen and not just give in to the latest little thing, but bring a heart of compassion and a mind of wisdom to these issues, because there are huge ramifications to the decisions we make. And anyway,
there's a human toll to all of it, and I think it's too often skirted with headlines of so-and-so did this, so-and-so. There are human beings caught in all of this. And it's something that, I'm glad you were willing to talk about it, because I just think I think these are images, you think of, Time magazine images type that are going to be burned into, and that plane picture specifically is just one that will mark 2021 and maybe this decade was this moment.
It's hard to believe that it won't mark the Biden presidency. I know it's just beginning, but that it won't mark this is what happened.
Yeah.
I don't know that. And you say, well, you're being unfair. That's because you're this or that. Well, be that as it may. It's just some images become the defining image. And this is a defining image that for all of us should break our hearts. Whether you're Democrat, Republican, it doesn't matter. I'm not just trying to score cheap political points. That, I know some people will think I just did. And you could say that, whatever. But for all of us, I just worry about anybody who wouldn't look at this and say, okay, this has been a real tragedy.
Yeah.
You have partisan blinders on if you can't look at this and go, this is a tragedy. And don't play the what about game with me. Okay, I've said that to people on the right and the left. Don't come at me with, well, what about what happened? Forget the what about.
Yeah.
Everybody, you can play that game all day long. What about this?
Right.
It's a tragedy.
Right.
That's what about.
And it's why the main point you mentioned is so critical. Take the time to lament. Express it explicitly. Why are you sad? Because there's lots of reasons to be sad over there. And don't get lost in some of these other things. Get focused on the people that have been affected by what is now an awful situation, and take the time to really work through that. Because I think it's a cheap out to go like, well, if this would have happened this way.
Just to make it politics. And we've touched on it. So, as I've said, there are political conversations to be had.
100%.
But I think what you're saying is, if you're asking me, I'm a pastor, so I'm concerned about your spiritual health first. And I would just say, take time to lament.
Yeah.
If the Lamentations is any God, maybe it's good to write them out.
Yeah.
Maybe it's good to sit down and say, I feel sad. I feel angry. This is a tragedy. I don't understand how God would allow this. Why is this happening? Write your laments out to the Lord, but then direct them to the Lord and put your hope in Him.
Right.
Where else are you going to put it?
Yeah. And that's what we're hearing. I mean, and honestly, it's amazing, but that's what some of the stuff I've seen from the Christians on the ground in Afghanistan. Their hope is still in the Lord. The hope is still, I mean, one message as heartbreaking as, so many people have met Jesus in the last couple of months, and now they're prepared to meet Him face to face in the following days and weeks. So this is the hope that is carrying them. It's the hope that has to carry us. And it's important, though, to just, let your heart be broken. Like, I love the lament. It's good. It was a great series. If you did miss that, you should go back because we unpacked it in greater detail. But thanks for wading in on this, Pastor. I know it's a heavy topic. It's something we're all looking at, and certainly want to end by saying, our thoughts, our prayers. Obviously, we're taking this time. I was in all the meetings I was in Monday and Tuesday here as a staff. Our staff, we couldn't even start. We had to start by praying for what's going on over there, just because it would be. I was proud of working at a place where we couldn't just start. We can't just talk about Wednesday night, which is important, and you should come Wednesday night if you're not planning on it already. But it was important to say we have brothers and sisters at another part of the world that are facing this, and we got to stop and pause on that.
And it underscores the hope of our faith, because you said there's a time to let your heart be troubled, and I can almost hear somebody, well, what is that? No, the Bible's Ecclesiastes. There's a time to mourn. There's a time to grieve. That's Lamentations. And then I hear the word of Jesus, let not your heart be troubled. Why do you say that? Because they were troubled, and he knew what they were about to go through, and what he was saying. But what did he say? Let not your heart be troubled, because there's really no problems in the world. That's not what he said. Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. Now, he knew they were about to go through a nightmare. They were about to have their faith crushed. And so he says, believe in God. Do you believe in God? Believe in me. Because in my Father's house are many mansions. If it weren't so, I would have told you. And if I go, I will come again, and I will receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. His point was, you are going to have trouble in the world, but keep your eye on eternity. And I think moments like this are a reminder that we live in a broken world, and at times it will break us. And, we said something we were just even discussing before we went on the air, and I thought was very insightful. You said, I'm not even sure, though, human beings were made to absorb this much suffering, because days before you knew suffering in your world, right? You knew suffering in your village, your town. With the 24-hour news cycle, we had suffer every day. The suffering of the day is, the tragedy of the day is and I think if you feel overwhelmed, I think maybe it's because it's overwhelming. Yeah. And so if you feel that way, I think you're sane. If you feel overwhelmed, it's probably because you are overwhelmed. But put your hope in the Lord. We trust in him. We trust him to take care. Those are his people who have trusted in him. He loves all the people of Afghan, the Muslim people as well. He loves them. And Christ died for them. And we don't know, we can't see the end from our vantage point. We only see what's happening now, and it looks like an utter tragedy. But who knows what will happen in 5 or 10 or 20 years? God knows. And that's why, even in the Lamentations, we said that. It was a time when Jerusalem had been decimated. But God had a plan 70 years later. And the writer of Lamentations was kind of looking through eyes of faith to say, God has a plan. I'm going to trust in the Lord. And that's kind of what we do here, is we put our trust in him. And that's what I would encourage you to do if you feel overwhelmed. Just put your trust in the Lord, and even though you don't understand what's going on.
That's good. Good stuff, Pastor. Thank you so much again for talking about that and wading in on that subject. Hey, one more time, just as we wrap up here, just letting you know all kinds of ways to get connected here at Calvary in the next couple of weeks and months as we're kicking off our almost fall kickoff, let's call it, as if we're still in August. You can get all the information on the stuff we talked about at the beginning of the podcast on calvary.us. Calvary.us, you can get the whole rundown, all our groups, so what's going on Wednesday nights, all kinds of great stuff on calvary.us if you missed some of that stuff at the beginning. Thank you so much for listening, for leaving reviews, for reaching out to let us know you're listening. I appreciate everybody out there, and we'll be back with another episode here very soon.